If there is an undeniable truth about Arcane, is that every single character of the show is extremely well written, exposing both the right amount of depth and complexity. And despite the fact that each one of them has their own convictions, backgrounds, and dreams, we still get to connect with all of them, since their actions and decisions are generally justified by their world vision and reality. Such is the case of Silko, an unquestionably complex character, often regarded as the main villain of Arcane's fascinating story. But is he evil as people tend to classify him, or is he just a misunderstood character whose intentions are not as vile as they seem? The first time we're introduced to this character is in an underwater secret lab. He looked as intimidating as expected, and every element from the scene succeeded into building an undisputable image of evilness and villainy. He was pleased to learn that Vander, later revealed as his brother, was in trouble with the opposite, which gave us the necessary information to understand that this guy was not to be rooted for. Not so much later into the story, we get subtle glimpses of Silko's character that continue to reassure us that his goals are not entirely honorable. A distinguishable thirst for power and glory made him look like any other cliché villain. But it wasn't until episode 3 that we get to see further into his motivations while he spoke to Vander. For reasons that remain unknown, years before the events of Season 1, Vander and Silko fought next to the toxic waters of Zaun. Vander injured Silko beneath his left eye before submerging him into the lake, and the highly polluted water flooded into Silko's eye, rendering it infected for the rest of his life. It's here when we get to see a fascinating side of Silko, because unlike typical villains, Silko is not resentful for what his brother did to him. In fact, he even said he used to respect him even after that. It's at this point that we learn about Silko's real ambition, which is to free the Undercity and accomplish the unification of the Underground as the nation of Zaun. A seemingly noble cause which was instantly overshadowed by the atrocities he was committing his way to achieve it. Hence the main difference between Vander and Silko. Silko is willing to do whatever it takes to succeed, while Vander prefers to stand back in order to maintain peace among both cities. Naturally, Vander became a huge obstacle for Silko, which triggered the decision of kidnapping him to later transform him into one of his Shimmer soldiers. This is what makes Silko such a misunderstood character to begin with, especially considering that we, the audience, were inevitably supporting Vander, since not only was he closer to Jinx and Vi, but also represented the morally correct person. Then the idea of freeing the Undercity seemed nothing far from a luxury, a mere whim to justify the antagonist's actions. And with this, I'm not saying that he's right. I'm not uttering that Silko is a misinterpreted generous hero, because he's most definitely not. He tested Shimmer in an ignorant child, cruelly murdered enforcers and citizens from the underground, bribed and extorted Marcus, tortured his followers to regain loyalty, tried to sacrifice his brother for the cause, among many other cold-blooded actions that shaped Silko as a ruthless, villainous threat. Until he found Jinx. A vulnerable soul, lost and disoriented, recently expelled and rejected as a useless weakling, a hopeless child pushed aside. We can draw several conclusions as to why Silko decided to shelter Jinx instead of leaving her alone or even killing her on the spot. He may have seen her as an opportunity to blackmail Vander's remaining allies, or as just another useful minion for his collection. But the truth is that Silko saw himself reflected in her. Jinx's suffering was nothing far from his own suffering, a byproduct of a broken family and an unsuccessful dream. He refused to let that story repeat itself and comfort her. Accepting Jinx became Silko's one and only decision unconnected to his cause. She became his only relief from the blatant world he lived in, and ironically, his only mistake. After some time, Silko becomes a pivotal father figure to Jinx. He trusts her with personal tasks, and he even tells her off whenever her impulsiveness causes trouble. We can see Silko constantly advising her to acknowledge her past and let go of her demons. He even offers her the opportunity to be reborn in a symbolic ritual, selfless actions that show us that deep down he cares. But everything changes for Silko with the return of Vi, who comes to threaten both his empire and his only family. No wonder this is one of the few times we see him collapse and lose control over his frustration. Another subtle hint that helps us understand that Silko and Jinx are not exactly opposites. Once Jinx finds out about her sister, this father-daughter relationship starts to fall apart due to trust issues. However, Silco did not know about Bai until very recently, so can we blame him for keeping the information to himself? Plus, he could have genuinely believed that Bai was there for the Hextech crystal and not for Jinx. So was Silco really trying to protect Jinx, or was it only a selfish attempt to not lose her? Silco was there when Jinx needed him most. Whether she was mentally or physically hurt, he did his best to keep her safe. After her defeat against Echo, he takes her to Singed himself in a desperate cry for help. Here, we can see that he can't accept the mere thought of her being gone, not even for a second. Even Singed understands his pain, which is why he proceeds to sedate Silco in a way to spare him the insanity of the process. It's precisely after this moment that Silco realizes he has become soft. Jinx has now become his Achilles heel, his most vulnerable spot, and an obstacle to his conviction of achieving his so-desired nation of Son. We can distinguish this when Jace asks him to turn her in for her crimes. At this point, Silco was one step away from his dream, one step away from accomplishing everything he has been fighting for. This is Silco's biggest dilemma. The man who is known for doing whatever it takes to achieve his goals, no matter the consequences, now unwilling to sacrifice Jinx for the cause. This situation leads him to finally understand Banjo. Silco finds himself in his brother's shoes, willing to sacrifice himself over his daughter, just like Banjo did for Bai. He has just become the exact kind of man he once despised. Suddenly, this almighty villain falls apart, leaving just an ordinary human being, a father. During Jinx's tea party, there is a pivotal moment when we can see one of the main differences between Silco and Bai, while both of them try to persuade her. Bai offers Jinx a new life, away from everything, a fresh start. But Silco knows this is not a reasonable idea. Bai knew Powder, but she barely knows Jinx. The following events proved Silco right. Bai, in a desperate attempt to convince Jinx, starts to remind her every single family member they used to have. In Bai's mind, this is fine, but for Jinx, this is nothing far from a torture. Bai is unconsciously waking up all of Jinx's demons, and Silco knows this, which is why he tries to stop her. Of course, we cannot blame Bai for trying. We have seen that Banjo's image gives her power and will to move forward. To Jinx though, it does exactly the opposite. This is an undisputable sign that she doesn't know her sister anymore. After the dispute that ends with Silco being shot, we can witness one of his most noble acts. His death represents his failure. Everything he ever dreamed for is now gone. But instead of being mad, frustrated, or desperate, he looks at Jinx with a sincere expression. He comforts her. He makes sure she knows she hasn't done anything wrong. Silco knows how much Jinx struggled with her past, and he doesn't want her to be haunted by his image as another intrusive voice inside her head. Silco makes sure to free her from this guilt by telling her how perfect she is. Even after her mistakes, even after her struggles, her impulsiveness, he finds nothing but good words for her. It truly shows how much he cared and loved her. Silco's last will was not ordering Jinx to get revenge or to complete his dream of Son. His last will was to help his daughter live without any more pain. This moment really makes us question Silco's whole character all over again. Every decision, every action, every lie has now more meaning than before. Was he really as evil as he seemed? I guess that depends on how you decide to interpret him. Silco was without a doubt one of my favorite characters throughout the show. A spectacular character development and an even more extraordinary story. Well guys, this has been the analysis. Thank you very much for watching. I sincerely hope you enjoyed it. I certainly had a lot of fun doing it. So feel free to contribute with your own perspective on the comment section below. And don't forget to subscribe and leave a like if you had a good time. Boy the Cap speaking, and we'll see yourselves in the next one. Bye bye.